council meeting formally now, and item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, please?
We have apologies, Mr Mayor, from Councillor Ward, Councillor Mrs Whitcomb and Councillor Moody.
Thank you for that. Item number 2, which is declarations of interest. I will be making a declaration of a personal interest in item 7C, little 1, as I am one of the 3 directors of Tavistock Heritage Trust. If there any other member wishes to make any kind of declaration at this point? No? And could I ask you, if you do come across something where you feel you should, then please make sure you catch my attention. Item 3, minutes of the council meetings. A, to confirm the minutes of the annual meeting of Tavistock Town Council. Agreed? All happy with them? Okay. And are there any matters arising from those minutes that is not covered by this evening's agenda? No? Okay, if you're all happy with that then, we will move on then please to agenda item 4, which is audit, accounts and annual return for the year ending the 31st of March. I will turn over to the Town Clerk in a moment, but what I would like you to do first, members, is turn to page 5 of 6 in the document which concerns the audit report generally. It should be headed Annual Internal Audit Report 2016-17 to Tavistock Town Council in your bundle. And it will be labelled page 5 of 6 at the bottom of the page. And there is a signature and a date, the 9th of June 2017. I'll ask the clerk if he wishes to address the council, which I think he might do. Not found it?
If you look to the...
Right, if you go through all of the figures, first of all, that are set before you.
The annual governance statement, it looks like that. It's within that one, so it's not within, if you like, the financial statements prepared by your accountant. It's the actual document that's headed Local Councils, Internal Drainage Boards and other smaller authorities in England.
We're looking at page 5 of 6. Is everybody with us? Right, thank you. Town Clerk, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Page 5 has been completed by your internal auditor, and he has indicated that he is satisfied with the levels of control and assurance that the Council has in place in relation to the management of risk and conduct of its financial affairs. If you are satisfied that you agree with his assessment, if you then turn
Can we just check that everyone is satisfied with that? Each of the things put down there. I mean, it would be very difficult, in my opinion, to argue with an auditor if they've gone through it and says it's okay, but there may be comments. All happy? Yep, turn back then, please.
Thank you very much. If you then turn back to page 2 of 6, which is the annual governance statement, what we have indicated there against items 1-8 are suggestions, and I should say these are in pencil so they can be rubbed out if you happen to disagree, but which require the consent of the Council before we send this document to the external auditor, which indicate whether or not you are satisfied that there are appropriate measures of internal control and assurance in place for the organisation. Normally, if you're comfortable with what the internal auditor has said, I would expect you to be comfortable with this, but I think what I would say is, if you are prepared to look down through those items 1-8, are you comfortable as a council that we should answer in the affirmative to those points?
Yes.
Yes?
All okay?
Thank you very much. And in relation to item 9, that's non-applicable, so we'll complete that. If you're happy with that, that then takes us on to page 3 of 6, where we've pre-populated the figures for the accounting statements for the last financial year. From a legal point of view, or from a legal external auditing point of view, they classify these as the accounts, and I would invite you therefore to approve and adopt the accounts.
Everyone happy? Thank you with that. That deals with item 4A. Have you anything you wish to say on item 4B? Town Clerk?
No, I think all I would invite you to do is to note what we call the financial statements, which are those which have been prepared and submitted by your own accountant.
Councillor Ewing, please.
Really sorry, Mr. Town Clerk, that I didn't get back to you before. some of what I discussed with you was there, but also on page 23 of the accounts, other earmarked reserves. We seem to have an awful lot of money put by for elections. It's gone up to 15,000. And the localism, I was going to ask about that as well, but the town clerk did explain to me that the accountant does have his own little cost codes in his mind as to his appropriate language, which could be different to what we understand.
So the questions are, as I understand it, why have we put £3,000 into reserves for elections, and why have we put £30,000 into reserve for localism?
Yeah.
We've for some years now tried to maintain a localism reserve, something which will enable us to engage in projects and activities which come up in year and which provide benefit to the community and could be reasonably constituted as localism, devolution, those kind of activities. In relation to elections, depending upon whether or not a by-election arises, depending upon whether or not that is contested, the cost of that per ward can be in the order of approximately £4,000, and therefore, as you can see, if you look over a council term, £15,000 is really catering for 3/4 of those such events, should they arise.
Councillor Hughes?
Mr Mayor, sorry to say, but you misunderstood my question about the localism. 30,000 was taken from reserves, not put into reserves.
Yeah.
The localism reserve, as I say, is intended to provide cover for those kind of activities. Inevitably, what we look to do at year end is to try and fund across the expenditure of the council. Now, the practical reality at this moment in time is that we do not have a fully funded capital programme. Therefore, wherever we have had available monies, those have been transferred with a view to supporting the capital programme as best we can until such time as that becomes fully funded.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to test the town clerk's memory now, because I asked him a question on page 11 of the accounts, why there was such a substantial variance between the figures for 2016 and the 2017 at the bottom of that column, the difference, in other words, between 295 and 20,000. He does have an answer for you, because he spoke to Derek in my presence earlier on this evening, and I'm sure he will be pleased to pass on the response to my question, because I can't remember what it was.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and can I? There are a number of areas, but I think in particular one of the areas which were identified is the cash flow differences which have arisen from the Townscape Heritage Initiative scheme. That has both implications for our cash outgoings, because we are making payments to third parties, but also for the money which is coming in as we are receiving monies from Heritage Lottery Fund, both for our own projects and for other projects. So that's one of the principal areas that we've got there. Alongside, as you'll see, there are some variances on a year-on-year basis within some of the other figures.
Councillor Ewing?
There was just one more point. On page 24, I think we need to congratulate the council, because the parking services has written, we hoped for 9,770, but we actually achieved 23,615. So that brought us some extra pennies to the little pot. And my other questions, I think I will be having words with the General Manager about all the figures for cultural heritage, recreation and sport, because I don't understand them. And the town clerk's answer earlier wasn't good enough.
You're happy to take that outside of the meeting, are you? Or do you want them asked at this point?
Yes, because the town clerk's answer wasn't quite satisfactory enough, I'm afraid.
Well, I can only proffer to council the same answer that I proffered to Councillor Ewings. These are generic budget headings which are prescribed by SIPFA in terms of what they include. Areas such as cultural and heritage recreation, or certainly the recreation and sport, would include your play park areas and reallocation of costs which are associated with those. So it's not going to be just your capital spend, but it'll be the reallocated cost of support services and delivery services which relate to those.
Was that fast enough to confuse you, or would you like him to do it at a higher speed again?
No, it's the same.
Right. So are you happy to deal with that outside of the meeting, or are you still...
More than happy.
Thank you. Just for anybody who's relatively new to the council, the clerk used the acronym CIPFA. It's the Chartered Institute of Public Finance Accountants, which would be the normal accountancy qualification for most people working in the public sector. I'll try to ask him not to use those sort of acronyms because it doesn't help. Councillor Squire, were you indicating to speak?
No, I agree with your point, actually.
Oh.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Anything else on these accounts that any member wishes? Councillor Smith, please.
Yeah, is it the same sort of reasoning behind the corporate management figure jumping one year to... That's on the same page, 24. Budget 111, actual 249.
That one's got a highlight pepper as well.
I'd have to go back
that
and
could
have a
be
look.
the same reason, but
I'd have to go back and have a look at that one specifically. I don't know.
If an email could be sent to that, because I've got a highlighter on that one as well.
Right, can we make sure that these questions do get answered to members either by email or if needs be, I'd rather not leave it till the next meeting. I prefer members had an email explanation of them as soon as is reasonably possible.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I think the reason we do invite members on the agenda to submit their questions in advance is so that we can do our due diligence across the range of these. And I would say, in future, it is most helpful if you can give us advance notice, and then we'll be able to have a full answer for you, hopefully in advance of the meeting. But if not at the meeting, that you can share with colleagues.
Councillor Ewing? Oh no, you were just... you want to object to that, do you?
I do,
Right.
because the town clerk knows there are extenuating circumstances why I haven't been able to let him know, called looking after an ill husband.
Perhaps you've had a bonkers day as well then.
No, I wouldn't describe it as that.
Okay. Any other member got a question on the accounts? No? Councillor Squire, you have no questions?
Certainly not. I don't understand at all.
Okay.
It's an incomprehensible package which I have yet to assimilate, so I'm holding my precedence of it. Thank you.
Okay, the only reason I asked specifically Councillor Squire was that you may have noticed on page 3 that your name's not been included on the list of councillors. That is an oversight by whoever produced the document, and that will be corrected. It's not that you're a non-person, it's simply that for some reason it got missed off and it didn't get picked up until quite late on.
Well, he is honest enough to say he
I
doesn't
hadn't
understand
realised I was missed, so...
But I think if we could actually build on that, because probably, and I'm not being disrespectful to the other councillors around the table, but probably Councillor Squire is not the only person that doesn't find it easy to assimilate all this information. I would ask the clerk if we can try and organise some training at an appropriate level for members. We don't want an accountant giving us the ins and outs of a balance sheet, but enable us to understand these a little more easily would probably be helpful. Councillor Ewing?
Wouldn't the training that's provided by DALC, they have courses all the time, and councillors who don't understand them could go on the courses together. Shame Councillor Ward's not here, because I think he's just been on one, and he could say, what it's like. But they do run very informative courses as to being able to understand this lot.
I think it's quite important because, I don't think anyone needs to be trained to the level of an accountant, because that's why we employ people to do that, but it does help if you've got a basic understanding. Unfortunately with this, there's a slight twist to the way lots of accounts are put together, and it actually involves getting your head around that as well as the basic principles of balance sheets, and they do have a somewhat peculiar way of recording some of the information.
Yeah, you're quite right, Mr. Mayor. I think by way of context, this accounting regime in your financial statements was something which was adopted for the largest 41 councils in our sector when the best value obligation came in. It has since been discontinued as a requirement for our sector. The reason we continue to report in this way is to give you continuity so that you can actually go back year on year and see where variances and changes have occurred. But there is actually no longer an obligation for organisations of our size to report in this way, and one of the reasons why it was withdrawn as an obligation was because it was felt that it was it was too prescriptive and too complicated an approach for smaller councils, albeit we're a large council within the smaller council sector. But yes, I mean, what we'll do is we'll liaise with DAO, find out when the next session is. I mean, if there isn't one which is scheduled within the next 6 months, would you like us to arrange a session for them to actually come here?
I would think it would be helpful if, I mean, I don't want to take names now, but if people are interested, if they could let the clerk know at some point, it might be well worth, if there are a significant number, it might be well worth getting people down actually to here so we can do something locally rather than people having to go away. It raises a second question in my mind, that if I've understood what you've said correctly, and I'm paraphrasing to some extent, but in order to make it easier for us to make comparisons of what's gone before, we've continued to operate a system which is not easy, if not impossible, to understand. Is that right?
I think there are elements of it which are problematic in terms of what they are. The benefit is that you do have very extensive notes which relate to each one of the main statements that you've got in here. So, for example, you can look at this, you can understand exactly what the pension liabilities of the organisation are, where the staffing resources are deployed, and how and in what way. If you move away from this, effectively what you will move towards is, when you looked at the annual governance statement and you saw what we had pre-populated as being the figures, those will be the accounts. They'll give you a very, very high level set of a dozen or 14 figures, and that's it. Now, for an organisation of this size, certainly my suggestion to you would be you do require a higher level of management information than that, in terms of at year end understanding how the organisation has operated and how the organisation might operate going forward. But that may be something that comes out of a joint training session, which you can sort of give some consideration to afterwards if you feel that it's worthy of change.
I would have thought it might be worth, certainly possibly post a training session, but it might be worth a smaller group of members actually taking a look at this and see if there is something that we could do that would reduce the amount of paperwork and at the same time clarify. I mean, you almost do need a set for qualification, really, to get your head around all of these. And I'm sure there is a simpler way of producing some of this information. But it's worth looking at, I think. Okay, any other questions? Yes, Councillor Williamson, you're about to
I'm not
enter
sure.
the fray?
Not sure, Mr Mayor, but Budget and Policy Committee has a function here. I happen to be a member of it. I'm not a chartered accountant. I've looked at this and I thought there's a lot of information there. Maybe we, the Budget and Policy Committee, should act as pioneers and explainers. I'm not inviting myself to be sent to the guard room, as it were, but maybe there's a role for the Budget and Policy Committee to inform Council and be helpful on some of these things and pick up on points like Councillor Johnson has made. It's just a thought, that's all. I'll leave it there.
Sounds like a very good thought, and I will ask the clerk to ensure that that item appears on the agenda for the next Budget and Policy Committee, please.
Just a correction, I think it was Councillor Ewing's made.
Right, okay. It's fine. The point's been accepted. I'm not going to...
We won't name all
Not going to step into the middle of that. So, members, we're on item 4B, little 2, I think, which is consider and approve the statement of accounts of the authority. Are you happy to approve them? Thank you very much.
Don't we have to have a formal proposal and second as to the accounts?
It would be very helpful if you were happy to propose them.
Yeah.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Smith, thank you. Would you like a vote? Those in favour, please show.
Mr Kemp likes the vote.
Does he? Thank you. I wonder if he was as pleased with the last one that took place. Not here, I was referring to nationally. Item 5 then, please. Strategic and service plans. Item 1, strategic plan, corporate service plan enclosed. The Town Clerk, I presume, is going to lead on that.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. You've got two items before you, one of which is a review of the past year in terms of what we set out to do, what we did, and an associated commentary in relation to corporate services. So that's very much a précis, if you like, the short version which you can comment on if you feel appropriate. The other thing that you have before you in relation to this item is the is what we've now called the Strategic and Corporate Services Improvement Plan. What we've done here is we've used the same reporting format as you have for the annual corporate plan, but at the front end we have inserted the outcomes of the various meetings and events that we've had with yourselves to discuss what the strategic plan for Tavistock Town Council might be. So the first 3 pages effectively are a summary of what we understand members to have identified as being priorities, setting out the strategic plan for the Council for the period 2017 to 2021. It's at a high level. It is structured in a similar way to that of the previous strategic plan. So we've still got the headings of community, environment, economy and democracy for continuity purposes. But what we've tried to do is to synthesise the key messages coming out about the things that the council itself is able to do. And I think what I would do is distinguish this from either a neighbourhood development plan, which of course is a plan for the built development of the town, or a town vision, which would be setting out your aspirations for the town across a range of areas of things which you would support but not necessarily be a deliverer. So this, if you like, is the strategic plan for delivering the council's business, linked to the corporate plan, so a 4-year plan for the council and then a 1-year delivery plan in the corporate plan, and you've also got the 1-year delivery plan for the community and out services submitted by the general manager. If you are broadly comfortable with this approach, it enables us to have a strategic plan in place. Obviously you can review it as we go forward, but it also is of assistance to us in terms of dealing with some of our partners, most particularly organisations like Heritage Lottery Fund, who will be able to see the framework within which we're operating strategically over the longer term, rather than just operating on a year-on-year basis. And that's something which increasingly we're finding partners are actually asking for.
Follow that. Councillor Smith.
I think it's just worth mentioning, I think you said before, Town Clerk, that the vision that's included within the document is the one which came before the members' meeting, not a council meeting, but the members with Leslie Smith, and it's the revised council vision, so it's worth members being aware of that. It's one that we used at that time.
Councillor Ewing, please. Ewings, sorry.
On page 3 of the document, under economy, the very first thing it says, the Town Council will work actively with business community and other stakeholders, etc. I really think that we need to be working hard on that. I know that we're trying to work with BID and the Chamber, who are once again complaining that nobody from the Town Council is going to their meetings. And I understand that they've actually written to the Town Clerk about it now. So, if we want to work with groups, we've got to, do this. I would also suggest that Councillor Sellis should be slightly involved in this as well, as the local Devon County Councillor, because of the implications for business and economy that Devon County Council drive forward, and it is one of their drives to be based on economy. Brexit keeps talking about the economy and jobs have to come first. And, it is important as a landlord and as an employer that we do engage with this and work cohesively as a town council with these other outside groups to support our town centre. Otherwise, use it or lose it, as they would say. And I don't want to see that happen to our beautiful town. So we really do need to engage in this and not just have it as written in this annual report and then it gets shoved in a drawer and that's the end of it.
Thank you. Okay, that's the strategic plan and the corporate service plan. I think it's not... Don't perhaps?
If I may, Mr. Mayor, there is just one other element. I mean, members may have other areas they wish to look at, but there is one other thing that I probably should draw members' attention to within this, and that is if you turn towards the back of the corporate plan, you will see the risk register, and in particular, I just ought to flag to you that there are 3 areas of risk which have increased and are currently running on a 4x4 matrix. The reason I draw that to your attention is if they were 5x5, you would be on certainty of a catastrophic event. So 4x4, although 16 is a lot less than 25, we are talking about significant areas of risk. And I'm just drawing them to your attention because they are areas which we as your officers are suggesting have increased. Clearly you may take a different view, but it would be helpful to have you either endorse the risk register as part of this, if you're not comfortable with the risk, but comfortable with the assessment that has been applied there, or indeed to supplant that with your own views if you feel that we've misscored those.
Town Clerk, before you sit down, there was a fair bit of jargon in that. Do you want to just open that up a little bit? Talking 4x4s, that, to me that means a Land Rover or something similar, and 5x5s. I think I understand what you're talking about. I just want to make sure that everybody understands the importance of the risk register in relation to the requirement of the members of this council to have responsibility for the governance of the council. The risk register is fairly critical.
It is, thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. Yes, if you turn to page 24 of the report, you will see that we assess risk against two factors, one of which is the likelihood that something will happen, and the other one of which is the anticipated severity with which it will happen. When I'm talking about a 4x4 matrix, we are talking about something which in terms of severity of impact is major, and in terms of likelihood is probable. And therefore we are talking about something which is a significant risk to the council, and therefore something which you would wish to have in your mind when considering how best we proceed. And I think in particular whether or not you feel that the measures that we have put in place and what we try to put in the action details column are things like those which can control the risk, those which can represent mitigations to the risk. Are those giving you a direction of travel that the risk is now under control, is potentially going to go down, or indeed is potentially going to go up, as the case may be? If you think the risk is going to go up on something which is major and probable, then we have got a serious problem and we need to find more and other ways of controlling or managing that risk. If you feel that it is stabilised, then it is about saying, well, we are prepared to accept that level of risk because, or alternatively, we're not. Now, some of the things which have been scored in that way will in effect come back to you. So, for example, clearly one of the factors is where we go with regard to the Guildhall project. Now, at this moment in time, we haven't got all the information in relation to how that project is going to be configured. We haven't got the full business case. You're not actually in a position, in fairness, to be able to make the risk assessment in relation to that. But when we have the conversation around that, that will be one of the things we'll bring you back towards the conversation we've had today in order to say, are you comfortable with the level of current and future projected risk associated with this project and where that places the council in relation to your appetite for risk. Risk is not necessarily, as the Mayor I'm sure will tell you, risk is not necessarily a bad thing, but it's important to align the organisational appetite to risk to the risks that you yourself are prepared and willing to take.
Town Clerk, can I just ask in particular, I've picked up 3, I think, 4x4s, 2 of them are in red, one of them's in black. C8, capacity, hidden in that statement, I think, is that the risk that the Council will fail to recognise the extent of demands. On page 23, placed upon the organisation, my concern would be the risk that the demands placed upon individuals within the Council, are we at significant risk? And it would appear on the 4x4 principle that we could be, and if so, do we need to be thinking seriously about addressing that level of risk in terms of the capacity on individuals and the effect that that may have, A, on their efficiency and B, on their health?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, this is an area of risk which we've left at the same assessment as we had last year. I think to a certain extent it reflects that a lot of the ambition of the Council is being delivered by a relatively small number of core staff, and that creates pressure both in terms of their capacity to deliver those things. It also creates risk in terms of if they were to move on at critical points and to the extent to which they are or are not replaceable. We have undertaken some measures by way of seeking to mitigate that already. In 2015, I think we reviewed the Works Department arrangements. We created the post of General Manager, and we created a more coherent structure, if you like, between the out services. So it wasn't just the Works Department, it was about how we could actually have all the out services working together. We have other members of staff who are now more actively able to contribute towards some of the projects that we have. So the cemetery administrator and the works administrator are now actively contributing across a range of the higher level projects that we have, and that was a resource that we didn't have a couple of years ago. We've also taken a further look at how we actually configure the delivery of projects. So if you take a project like Duke Street refurbishment, and that was to be delivered maybe 3 or 4 years ago, that would have almost exclusively been delivered, I suspect, and I'm looking to my colleague, as an in-house project, where the project was effectively managed and delivered in, when I say in-house, not the contractors would have still been brought in, but it would have been project managed by the General Manager. We're now taking advantage of the opportunities of utilising on major projects complementary professional services, so the lead on that, who will still report to the General Manager in the same way, is going to be the architect. So what we've actually done is we have introduced some measures of mitigation and control and reduction in terms of level of risk. The reason that we've assessed it as still being the same is that I think we've gone from a kind of a higher 4x4, if you forgive me, to a lower 4x4, but given the fact that we've got Duke Street shops, Pannier Market roof, Guildhall project all coming down the tracks, I think as officers we probably felt a little bit uncomfortable given that critical mass in actually reducing it. But it's in your hands, sir.
So can I ask then, from the council as a whole, is there anything in your opinion that this council and the members of this council should be doing or considering in terms of reducing that risk or containing the risk and managing the risk?
Sorry, that's a very good question.
I want something on record as to whether you feel that the council needs to take action to support and protect its staff and the issues. I don't mind how you answer the question, but I want something on record to know whether we as a council need to be considering that something needs to be done. If you say the answer is no, then that's fine. If you say yes, then perhaps we would need to take some further time, not tonight, but to discover what needs to be done.
I think the answer at this stage is if the projects that we have scheduled are run to the timings that we have, which means that they run one into another, and we don't have projects running at the same time as one another, that they are deliverable within the resource we have and with the professional teams that we have in place. The two caveats I would say, I think one of which is there are one or two key personnel who, if we lost, there would be a major impact, and at this moment in time I think it's very hard to plan for that, but I am hopeful that we won't lose them within that time frame. And secondly, I do think that when we have certainty or greater certainty around the Guildhall project, it's something we should revisit, because at this moment in time one of the difficulties we have as your officers is the same as you have, which is that we don't have sufficient visibility to be able to adequately and sufficiently understand what the organisational implications of proceeding with that project in whatever guise might be. So being really off the record, please, Lizzie, being really blunt about it, if the project proceeds with HLF funding, there will be one set of contingencies. If for whatever reason we're unsuccessful, or alternatively we proceed on another basis, then there will be another set of contingencies that we need to take into account. What we do know is we have to deliver something for the Guildhall. It's in public ownership. We took it into our ownership in order to be able to deliver a public facility there. But what we can't be sure of is quite what that's going to look like yet, or what the implications will be organisationally on either the capital or the ongoing delivery side of things. So, I mean, I would welcome the opportunity, if you're agreeable, Mr. Mayor, and if colleagues are agreeable, for us to actually bring this back to the first meeting of the Budget and Policy Committee in what I call the budget setting round, so the September meeting, We will know where we're at then in relation to the Duke Street works. We'll have had the tender returns in relation to the pannier market, and we'll have submitted in relation to the Guildhall. And if you're agreeable, I'd very much welcome that opportunity.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Ewings wants to come in, but can I make some suggestions if you're going to bring something through to budget and policy? I think it would be helpful to know whether you feel the council should be considering key person insurance, which allows you to claim if you've got key personnel, if something was to happen to them, then you can claim some money in order to be able to bring someone else in. Whether you feel we should be reducing the size of the agenda in some way or another, and whether you believe that the current situation is sustainable in terms of the health of all of our employees. Bring those points forward. Councillor Ewing, please.
My point is along a similar line. With all these projects that we've got going, we've also got to look at the day-to-day running of the council and the pressures that we're putting upon varying departments, the office, the works department. They have just had quite a few resignations, so we're going to, we've recruited, from what I understand, but they're going to be new people who don't have the experience. So that could put us a bit more behind. So we've also got to think about the day-to-day running of this council and the varying departments that we have. Under, the market staff are under more pressure with the pannier market, etc. I know the general manager and the cemetery administrator are doing a lot of work on that together. But there is still that pressure that is being put on our staff. And, I'm just concerned that it's not just the projects, Mr. Mayor. It is the day-to-day running of this organisation, which puts the pressure on those people who are running the projects, because when all's said and done, the buck stops with the town clerk and the general manager. And as we've already alluded, we don't want them falling under buses, falling off the roof in the case of the town clerk. But we don't want those pressures on our staff because they do run the council, and we have got to be aware that actually what goes on the very lower ground is being managed in a good way, that they haven't got that worry and pressure of what is going on within their higher level work with these projects.
Thank you. Shouldn't mention you falling off motorcycles, and obviously whereas
No, he's careful on those.
Right, members, I don't know that we can pursue this any further tonight unless anybody specifically wants to, but I would like to see a report back for the next budget and policy meeting in terms of whether there are issues, because at the end of the day, the buck actually stops with us, finally, and we are responsible for the governance, we are responsible for the finance of the council, and we are responsible for the health and well-being of our employees. Councillor Smith?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, mine is just a general point, and that is that the town clerk talked about 4x4 being okay, so we're sitting there, and 5x5 being a bit of a naughty. Well, as far as I'm concerned, we're indicating in the paperwork that we've got that there remains a case for the likelihood weighting to be increased in the partnership working sector. So it wouldn't be 5-5, but it would be 4-5, which is almost a catastrophe. So if there's remains a case to be made, then surely that's one of the areas that we must be concentrating on, because your action details are talking about performance management and monitoring, presumably of partners, and that means an increase in effort on our part. I mean, it's on page 20 of the document, and at the bottom, under the little 9, which clearly states see below, it says there remains a case for the likelihood weighting to be given to be increased. So that would make it 4-5, which would be almost a disaster.
Thank you,
Mr. Mayor. I mean, I think what that's really reflecting is the extent to which almost all of the major initiatives we're currently undertaking are dependent, substantially now, upon the intervention, the participation, or the engagement of one or more partners. And depending on which one you're looking at, so if you're looking at the Townscape Heritage Initiative, it's clearly the critical partner there is Heritage Lottery Fund. If you're looking at the Guildhall, there's Heritage Lottery Fund and there's Tavistock Heritage Trust. If you're looking at Duke Street Works, there are critical partners in terms of our the traders who have got the leases on the shops there. Whatever we're doing, we don't operate or live in a bubble anymore. And I think what that's doing is it's saying, in any one of those areas, you could have something happen which materially changes the situation. We do everything we can in terms of managing the risks within those and within the project plans of those initiatives, but there is always the possibility that, and when you're talking about larger projects, so the Pannier Market Roof, the Butcher's Hall, which obviously we've done now, the Guildhall, those do go up have the potential, if you like, to go up in terms of the risk rating. The other thing I forgot to mention, actually, in my previous answer as well, is the other thing that we're doing by way of trying to grow capacity is the appointment of the Market Development Officer, which we're going to be advertising shortly. And that very much picks up, I think, on Councillor Ewing's point, which is about how can we provide something which operates not only at the strategic level, but also provides support, guidance and a framework which actually assists at the more operational levels of parts of the business.
Okay, members, I think what we'll aim to do is, if it's all right with all of you, we'll try to bring back a report from the Budget and Policy Committee which tackles as many of these issues as we can. I mean, ultimately, with risk, all one can do is take the appropriate means to try and reduce the risk. And that's the bit that we need to be sure of, is that we've managed to do that as far as we possibly can. But I am genuinely concerned, not because of any reason to be in the sense that I haven't seen the town clerk walking around talking to himself yet, but it's, you know, you put people under pressure and it's fine for sometimes for a very long period of time, but we are actually responsible in law for the health and well-being of our staff, ultimately. So is there anything else on that item 5, members, or are you happy to, it's just for noting, I assume, at this stage, is it?
I would say for adoption and endorsement, if you could, Mr. Mayor.
Fine, it doesn't say that in the notes, but that's fine. Is anybody willing to?
With the caveat that this other part of it that we've discussed now is going to go to budget and policy. I can't support it unless we have that in there as part of the minutes.
You're welcome to make the proposal anyway.
Well, that's what I'm doing then.
Fine, any way you want. Is there a seconder for that proposal? Thank you very much. You all happy with that, members? Yes? Okay, thank you. If we move on to item 6 then, electoral matters.
Sorry, I don't know whether there's any comments, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, sorry, the community
General Manager's report.
Well, I can imagine there will be. Sorry, I forgot about that. 5.2, community, commercial and community. That was to follow. It came out in a separate envelope. It's got a lovely blue top to it. It's got a picture on the left-hand side, which I presume is Goose Fair, but it's not immediately apparent. Any comments or questions from members? Sorry, Councillor Smith.
I think the officer himself is aware that there needs to be a little bit of trimming or tightening up of some of the areas within this report, because I think there are some duplications and there are some things which I know that it's all down to time you have to do these things. But there are some areas that could be tidied up. General areas, they're not points of principle, but they are general areas where they're repeated and stuff like that.
Duly noted. Perhaps you would like to have a separate conversation outside of the meeting with the General Manager to highlight things. Councillor Squire, please.
Mr. Mayor, I'd appreciate it if the authors of a report could put the name to the report. It's very valuable to know who compiled what particular item. And a delicious opportunity for an executive summary, I think, to be honest. if they were so willing to be themselves.
Sorry, General Manager, do you wish to respond?
I would say that the author element is covered on page 2, but I'm more than happy to provide an executive summary for the future versions.
Need it highlighted.
Anyone else wish to comment on this document in any way, shape or form? Do you need this one formally adopted as well, Mr. Clerk? So someone willing to propose? Councillor Ewings, is there a seconder out there? Thank you. Councillor Venning. Those in favour then, please show. Thank you very much. I will now move on to item 6, electoral matters. You will be aware that with the resignation of Councillor Colin Rogers, we now have a vacancy, and you will also be aware, because the Town Clerk has made you aware, that if we filled that by co-option rather than by election, we would dip below the required number for this council to have its general power of competence. We have rehearsed what that means and the importance of it. It is therefore the intention to advertise the vacancy on Friday the 23rd of June, i.e. this Friday. Once that advertisement has been placed, there are then 14 working days in which 10 people have to complete a request form and send or simply notify the Borough Council that they require an election to take place. Thereafter, the election process will go into operation, and depending on whether or not we have more than one candidate, then it will depend on whether an actual election takes place. I think we had a long discussion following the last election when we were severely criticised for not having used poll cards. I would be expecting members to be happy that we do so on this occasion. We took an awful lot of criticism last time around. There is a cost associated to it. It is approximately £1,500, probably slightly less than £1,500, but it's a roughly £1,500 cost. But I think we'd be very foolish in terms of the public's representation and what they expect of us not to do poll cards this time around. So that is the plan for the election for the vacancy in the North Ward. The 10 people that request the election have to be resident in the North Ward. Not necessarily people who represent the ward, but they must be resident in that ward. So members in this chamber, if you are able, one or more of you, to organise yourselves and get 10 signatures requesting an election. It doesn't have to be a complicated document. It simply says, we, the undersigned, request an election in Tavistock North Ward. And if there's one or more of you willing to take that on and get the signatures and make sure that they get in within 14 working days, so effectively you've got almost 3 weeks from Friday the 23rd, then we can go ahead and see what happens. Are there any questions on that? No? You all happy? Okay, so if we move on to item 7 then, schedule of payments. I'm informed that no questions have been placed before the clerk prior to the meeting. Does anyone have any questions at this meeting? No? You're all happy? Yeah. So if I move on to 7B, the budget monitoring report. Again, I'm informed that no questions have been presented to the Town Clerk ahead of the meeting, but questions are welcome from the floor if anyone has any. All happy? Okay. If we move on to item 7C, requests for financial assistance. I need to advise you that Roman numeral little 4A and B have been withdrawn from this agenda. So we're only now dealing with 1, 2 and 3. I need to declare an interest in 1, as I said previously, because I am one of the 3 directors of Tavistock Heritage Trust, so I will not be taking part in the debate, nor will I be voting. But I will now ask the clerk to give us the background to that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the letter itself is somewhat self-explanatory. I know that Councillor Ewings and Councillor Smith will have had some knowledge of this from other areas. I don't know whether, Councillor Ewings, you wish to say something on it in connection with the relationship between the group who are now working with the Tavistock Heritage Trust and the former Heritage Festival.
As many of you know, whilst I was still the Mayor, the Chairman of Tavistock Heritage Trust asked to have a meeting with myself and 2 members of Tavistock Heritage Trust. No, not with them, God. The Tavistock Heritage Festival, sorry. So complicated, all these heritages. We have met with the chairman, I think, on 4 occasions now. We have agreed that we will assist with some fundraising for Tavistock Heritage Trust to help them on their way. It was suggested that the monies that we had through the Section 137 grants allocation, we had allocated £1,500 to Tavistock Heritage Festival. Mrs Gail Reid wrote an email to the town clerk expressing her support for that money that was not accepted by Tavistock Heritage Festival to be reallocated to the Tavistock Heritage Trust, but in the capacity that it would be to support fundraising events very similar to what the Tavistock Heritage Festival were proposing to do. I'm sorry, this is so convoluted, isn't it?
Yes.
So basically, what we're asking is if that money could be reallocated to Tavistock Heritage Trust, but it will not sit as we've already allocated 5,000 to the trust. It will be for events to take place in the Guildhall to start the pot of fundraising for the trust. Any questions I will accept.
Councillor Sheldon, please.
Yeah, I'm just going to ask now about that we're operating under a power of well-being, and we haven't done any grants this year because this is a grant application, right? It's not financial; it is a grant application. Obviously, I'd like to see a proper grant application form completed, and I realise what they're asking. They're asking for a transfer of a grant that was already given to give it to themselves under these circumstances. But I do feel that transferring grants will start. Somebody else won't be able to use a grant, and then somebody else will send a letter in. Can you transfer this to us? Because this only came from a conversation, according to this letter, between the grantor who was granted the money before, or we were the grantor, but the grantee. So I think this is a little bit complicated when it doesn't come via a grant application form. I realise we're not even in the period of when we deal with grants, and this is the sort of thing that people would bring up, say, well, hang on a second, we're not in the grant period, but I'm willing to look at grants throughout the year because circumstances come in that require grants over different periods. But at the moment, I wouldn't be happy with transferring a grant that's already, whatever circumstances, it's been granted to another organisation for different circumstances, and I would like to see a proper grant application form submitted to this council.
Thank you, Councillor Sheldon. Before I invite Councillor Smith, you've helped me because at the conclusion of this item, these 3 items, I was going to raise a very specific point with members, which is precisely what you've said, is that we've got 2 more grant applications coming in at the moment, neither of which have come on a grant application form, both of which then it makes it very difficult for us to actually assess what is being asked for what it is being asked, and what the bona fides of the organisation are. And I was just going to actually make that general comment, asking everyone, if you get approached for grants, if you could make sure that whoever is requesting the grant does complete a grant application form. As far as timing is concerned, we do, although we have a grant season, i.e. we have a deadline of mid to late November for grant applications to come in when they catch the annual grant allocation round, which takes place in December. But we do also have a policy in this council where we are prepared to accept requests for other grants during the course of the year, and we've always tried to be reasonably flexible with that. But it is important, I'm not referring to this application specifically, but I am asking if we could make certain that applications that come in do come in on a grant form. That way you can keep some control of it. This one is slightly different because it's reallocation rather than an application. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I as much as anyone, was extremely disappointed when the Heritage Festival organisers had to pull the plug on what they already had planned, which is quite a substantial programme. The reasoning behind that was discussed at I brought the matter forward at the Project Management Board yesterday, and again, I was just so sad to see that it happened in the way it did, when it had been so far progressed by very keen people who were, in actual fact, at that time, funding a lot of the activities from their own pocket. However, I believe now that the problem with this particular situation is that if we said the grant application form had to come forward, it couldn't come forward from the group that Councillor Ewings has just described, because it's only recently been set up, and we do ask to see a set of accounts and various other things and have bank details, and I don't think that organisation has that. So it's coming forward from the trust, who have only just set themselves up with a bank account and various other legal documents. So I think the problem is that, of course,
thank you.
as Councillor Sheldon has just said, and you've touched upon, we should actually see a grant application form for each application. It means that the actual group who wish to use this money for their activities wouldn't be able to do that. I'm not quite sure how the Heritage Trust plans to keep this money separate from their other funding, which they've had. And so I think that we're in a very difficult situation. Much as I would want to see this organisation, which were originally called the Friends, but the current chairman has said that they don't wish to be called the Friends of Tavistock Heritage Trust. So it's difficult to know where the organisation sits. There is a plan for quite a few activities. It is a good thing, but I'm not quite sure that if we, and I'm a little bit with Councillor Sheldon, that if we do it for this one, then under these sorts of circumstances you could get lots of people saying, well, you gave a grant to that organisation, which you have to bear in mind, councillors sit around for about 4 hours looking at these applications and going through application forms to come to their decisions. You're saying, well, those councillors looked at that application form, they granted it on the basis of what they had read, but now you want to transfer it to this organisation, which, although it's going to do some great things, it can't be in the same position as the organisation which you granted the grant to. So I think this council in itself has to really make a decision on the basis of whether it's not really a transfer, but do you want to help this organisation, and then how do you make sure, although the letters come in from Tavistock Heritage Trust, that this money is actually being used by the organisation who wants to do the work.
Councillor Palfrey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I agree wholeheartedly with Councillor Sheldon that this money cannot just be transferred over. No matter what the circumstances, I don't think we can safely, and I use that word advisedly, safely transfer that money over because we wouldn't be in the knowledge of what that money is going to be used for. And I think it would open up the floodgates for somebody else to say, well, I can apply for £5,000 and I'll just give it to you. I'll just give you £5,000 because I've transferred it. I don't want to put myself in that position where I've allocated money to some organisation on the belief of one set of circumstances to go to another organisation, albeit very similar, but could quite easily use it for something completely inappropriate to what we thought the money was going to be used for. So I would say in this particular instance, I would not be in favour of transferring that money over. But I would be in favour of looking at a case if they were to put a case forward in the appropriate manner.
Councillor Palfrey, could I ask you if you are thinking of or willing to put a proposal before this council so that it can be dealt with?
If what you could get a proposal out of what I just said, yes, I would be very much in favour of doing that.
Well, my understanding then is that you are proposing that this application be refused at this time, but that the council would be happy to consider an application from Tavistock Heritage Trust if on the appropriate grant application form, recognising the constraints, as Councillor Smith has indicated, as Tavistock Heritage Trust is a new organisation. It does have bank accounts, but it certainly doesn't have 3 years accounts to produce. It can't. It's an embryonic organisation. So we have a proposal which has been been seconded by Councillor Sheldon. Is there any further debate, members, or do you wish me to put that to the vote? Those in favour of the proposal then please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's clearly carried. Thank you. If we move on then please to item 2, which is to consider a request from Destination Oakhampton for financial assistance. I think the clerk may wish to say something and Councillor Mrs Johnson may also wish to say something, but we're in a very similar situation. We have no actual application. We do not know exactly what we're being asked to deliver, as far as I can understand. But Councillor Mrs Johnson, would like to have a go at explaining the situation?
Right, thank you. I represent the Town Council on Destination Oakhampton, which is looking at getting the train line back to Oakhampton first and then Tavistock secondly. Last year there was a very successful bus link from Hatherley, which took people from the town of Hatherley into Oakhampton to use the train to go to Exeter and further on for the day. Michael Ireland, who chairs the group, is keen that all the towns, so that's Bude, Hatherley, Tavistock, should all have a bus link going to the train. They've now got 2 coaches on the train, so they're keen to fill it. I have made some initial inquiries with the Tavistock Country Bus. Perhaps there are other groups that we could have asked about provision of a bus. They have said they could do it for less than £100 for a 16-seater, and that would be to take people to Oakhampton and back for the day. But they wouldn't be able to take the bookings or advertise it. So I ask who would be doing that. That is my real concern. I think people would probably, it works out just over £6, just under £7 each, I think, if it's a 16-seater. So I think people would be prepared to pay it. The issue is, of course, if not all the seats were sold. And thing that has really caused a bit of a problem in my mind, we haven't had a meeting recently, but there have been problems with the train timetable, and the trains are not going as, it's taking longer to get into Oakhampton than it was because there's some restriction on speed on the line. So the timetable has been changed, and the last thing I'd want anybody to do is organise a minibus to be going up there with people in it, and they've changed the train timetables, and that does concern me somewhat. I don't particularly want to take on being a booking clerk or advertising it. I've got quite a lot on at the moment. If somebody else is keen to do it, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how council feels about it. They're really asking us as a town council to sort out this bus, and that's something that the town council must decide.
Can I be quite clear then? This is the bit that wasn't clear to me, but I think from what you've said, I just want to check back that I've understood really, that they're asking us to both fund, albeit we might be able to recover the funding from fares, but also provide and operate the service. Clearly we would use someone else to do the physical provision of the bus and the driver, but they are asking this town council to take on that responsibility. Thank you. Any comments, members? Councillor Palfrey?
Thank you. I'll just refer you to the previous item 1, and I'll make the same comment again.
So would that mean that the Tavistock Town Council would have to make a grant application to Tavistock Town Council to do this then?
Who's that?
Well, Destination of Oakhampton have asked if Tavistock Town Council will do it.
Okay, Councillor Sheldon?
We have previously, this is where Councillor Johnson became part of Destination Oakhampton. I know there's other organisations and I do get confused. I don't follow the trains. We can see what they're trying to do, but unfortunately they haven't got all the detail there. And I think one of the problems is, as you mentioned about, it's not just asking for a grant to finance or to finance the risk of not selling all the seats and not being able to cover the costs. It's also asking for someone to actually run it and book the seats and organise it. Now, I think that what we could do, I don't know how much publicity with this Tavistock Times, we could ask for someone who may be willing or is interested in the trains to actually come along to council and indicate that they would be willing, if we were willing in the future, once we see what the facts are, to finance this. Do we know anybody who is willing to take the bookings and to do something about this? No, I don't know. I don't know whether, I don't think perhaps one of the local community transport people or would be willing to do this, the country bus. I think, first of all, I would suggest that we ask the country bus what funding would be required for this, and are they willing to run that as a private service, maybe of assistance.
I think Councillor Sheridan, I mean, if I understood Councillor Johnson correctly, they have said they would be able to provide a service on one return trip per Sunday for however many Sundays this goes on, which whether it's every Sunday of the year, I'm not sure. I doubt very much if it is. And they would be willing to do that for a cost of £100. What they would not be willing to do is take on any of the responsibility for booking, for issuing tickets, or any of the organisation of it.
Yeah, that's a shame. So basically, if we're going to be involved in this, just on that part, forget the financial side, we've got to find somebody who's willing to liaise with Country Bus and get some tickets sold or publicise it in some way.
Councillor, yeah, thank you. Councillor Mrs Johnson, have you got any brainwaves as to how we might move this forward? I would think in general, I would be supportive of it, and I suspect most of us would be supportive of it if the town council doesn't have to get itself involved in running it, because that's the tricky bit. And obviously I would guess that we're going to be held liable if there is any shortfall in the income. So if the seats on the bus aren't full, and you're going to need, you are going to need to charge a minimum of £6 or fraction over to get your £100 back. If the seats on the bus aren't full, presumably Tavistock Country Bus will be looking to this council to make good any deficit. I'm not clear from this. Are we talking about? We're talking about one return journey a Sunday. I'm not clear how many Sundays we're talking about.
I don't think it would be too many, Mr Mayor. I think to start with, we do one and see how that went. I have had, since Councillor Sheldon was talking, I wondered if Richard Seabright might be interested in becoming involved, and I could actually approach him. He's very keen to get the railway back here, and
sounds like a good suggestion.
Yeah. I'll contact him if that's
okay. I'll take the clerk, and then we'll look at that as a way of perhaps dealing with this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm quite comfortable with that approach. I would say I did write to Dr. Ireland asking him if he could provide more information. We haven't received any as yet. The other thing in terms of running and being, if you like, a bus service operator is I do have some concerns around that in relation to the fact that we don't have the general power of competence, and running a public transport service initiative is not something which falls within the normal remit of town and parish councils. Contributing towards community activities which provide that is a different thing, but I think the issue around running it is one which is potentially fraught with problems. So if there is someone within the community who could take that on, to whom we could actually make a contribution, I think that is a much cleaner and a much more appropriate way of dealing with it.
Could I suggest then, members, we ask Councillor Mrs Johnson to approach Richard and see whether he's willing to take that on. We might then perhaps be willing as a council, I'm not saying we would, we might want to consider whether we would underwrite the first operation, so that if the seats fell short, this council might be willing, that the limit of our exposure would be £100 maximum. And we might, I'm not suggesting we should commit to that tonight, but it's a thing that we might want to think about being able to offer in order to get this off the ground. Councillor Sheldon?
Yeah, I don't know when the first Sunday for this is, because obviously our next meeting is 6 weeks.
Sorry, the service is running already. I think unless we make a decision tonight, another 6 weeks will be into the holiday period, and then it'll probably be only another 6 weeks and the trains will stop.
Yeah, I'd like to propose then we do underwrite it by £100, dependent on our suggested person organising the tickets, etc.
Do you have a seconder for that, Councillor Sheldon? Thank you. Do members want to debate that? There is a suggestion. Sorry, Councillor Squire.
Who is Richard Seabright? Sorry,
Seabright, actually. Very good question. A number of us could answer it. I'm going to let Mrs Johnson deal with it because I'm sure she's much better qualified than I am.
I'm not sure that I am, Mr Mayor.
Richard Seawright is a local resident who is and has been extremely involved in trying to promote rail services to the southwest peninsula. That includes doing whatever is necessary to try and stabilise and preserve the railway line at Dawlish Warren and along the coast in general, and working hard to try and re-establish a rail link between Exeter and Oakhampton on a regular basis, such as exists with the Tarka line at the moment, and also an extension of that to Tavistock to allow the people of Tavistock to be able to go into Exeter and then go onto mainline trains from there to travel to London, Paddington, Waterloo, or wherever one chooses. He has been very active with the Peninsula Rail Task Force, very active with a number of these initiatives, and is normally very willing, and I think he's given a talk in this room even. He's certainly given quite a number of talks that I've been to on the rail infrastructure generally. We are very badly served by rail infrastructure in the southwest, and if you pick somewhere like Bude, I think if my memory serves me correctly, Bude is further from a mainline railway station than anywhere else in the country. Strange though that may seem, but it is true.
thank you very much.
Councillor Palfrey.
Can I ask then, if we go ahead as planned, how we will know whether or not this scheme is going to happen as councillors, and how we will get the information that we require to make the decision, and how we are going to then be able to make that decision if we're not be able to do it in the next council meeting?
Councillor Sheldon has put forward a proposal which has been seconded by Councillor Lewis that if we can, if Councillor and Mrs Johnson can find someone who is willing to take on the responsibility for the organisation of it, then that this council, if the proposal is approved tonight, this council agrees to underwrite one trip only. So the maximum exposure of the council would be £100 if no one bought a seat on the 16-seater minibus. And obviously every person that pays £6.50 or whatever it is reduces that exposure. If they put it up at £7, there's a marginal profit. That was the proposal that Councillor Sheldon was going with. In terms of how would we know what's going on, I feel we can trust Councillor Mrs Johnson to actually keep us advised by email, and those people who are not on email, we can arrange for them to be sent something in writing. That's my understanding of where we are at the moment. Any further debate? As there is a proposal on the table. The proposal is that the council, as I've just, well, I won't repeat it because I've just repeated it, haven't I? Those in favour of that proposition, then please show. That's clearly carried. Thank you very much for that. Let's give Mrs Johnson something to do anyway. Now, I think it's a good initiative. Right, item 3, which is to consider a request from Tavistock AFC towards an open-top bus. I think that should more correctly read towards the cost of providing an open-top bus in order to take Tavistock AFC around the town. But the clerk, I think, has perhaps a little bit more information.
Just really to say that this is again one of those items where we have asked for more information about what the proposal actually is, and we haven't received any yet. So I guess in the context of your discussion earlier, you may therefore wish to defer it pending receipt of that information.
Councillor Mrs Jones, do you wish to comment?
I can only comment that if you defer it to the next meeting or whatever, the carnival will have already taken place.
Oh, I see. This is to take place during the carnival, is it?
Yes, this is
right.
so they can be paraded round during the carnival.
Right. Would you like to speak further on the matter then?
all I can say is that at a meeting when the council, the football club met, it was discussed about having an open-top bus to parade around Tavistock AFC, who had won the league, which hasn't been done in their 129-year history, although they haven't actually accepted the promotion because they can't afford to go to the other clubs, because they'd be going all over the country, and they can't afford that and can't afford the players that would be needed to meet that calibre of the next league. They just felt it was also good to then involve Tavistock Community Football Club with the little ones being able to go on the bus as well. And Mr Pinch has written to the Town Council requesting some funding towards this bus from the Town Council.
Right, sorry, that wasn't clear to me from what I saw. So it is not for this Town Council to provide the full cost of a open-top bus, and I have no idea what that figure is. It won't be absolutely frightening, but it won't be small because it's a number of hours. Councillor Sheldon?
Yeah, I think the problem is here that this is not an independent time where they would be doing this as a football club. This is the actual carnival parade. They're asking the council to put money towards a carnival float. Now again, unfortunately, there are a lot of other floats and a lot of other people who struggle and spend hours getting those floats together. I know, I don't know the guy particularly, but he hasn't even found out whether the local bus company have got one at Plymouth. What do they use? Do they back a charity? Are there another sort of vintage bus society who do charitable things or are willing to assist? There's been no background apart from coming to the council and asking for some money, which we don't know, because I don't know anybody here who knows what the hire of an open-top bus would cost. So I think at the moment I think again they haven't got time before, I think 15th of July, and we've got the meeting afterwards, that I'm going to have to propose that unfortunately we have to refuse this. For the reasons I've stated, or anybody else has got any reasons, but I'm proposing that we refuse this.
Thank you. Can I see if there is a seconder for that proposition, please? Yes, thank you, Councillor Roberts. Members, do you wish to have any debate on the matter? Councillor Gibbons, please.
I would just point out that he's left it a bit late.
Thank you. Councillor Ewings, please.
In fairness, they only won it in May. You don't know that you're going to win the league when you're, if they put in a bid in November, they've got no idea they're going to win the league. So it is one of those ones, I think, as Councillor Sheldon said earlier, that actually it just suddenly arrives. And I will let you all vote on it, is all I will say.
Any further debate? Councillor Sheldon, do you want to turn your microphone off if you're not going to speak? Thank you. Any further debate, members? The proposal before you is that, and the information before us, that we refuse this application. Those in favour, please show. It's clearly carried. Thank you very much, members. I've managed to lose my place now. What have I done with it? We now move to the Plans Committee, I hope, despite the fact that I've managed to lose my agenda, but don't worry about it, I can make it up as I go along. Item 8 is to receive and consider the minutes of the meeting of the Plans Committee held on 25th of April. Councillor Venning.
Yeah, I'm Vice Chair. We'd like to make the plan for the 20th of April, the 16th of May, the 16th of June, be correct. So I've got enough to time going to print.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Ewings. All in favour? Thank you very much.
Can I just ask why they're on the right paper?
Mine are on, yeah.
I guess, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Venning.
I'd like to point that out. It would have been on the correct copy.
Yeah.
As would have
My diary's
or as otherwise put, because I wasn't there.
You are duly required to note, but this is not for minuting the indispensable nature of the assistant to the town clerk. I think the point's being made. The item 9 is service reports. The general manager's report, which is enclosed. Are there questions or queries from the members or comments? Don't let him off lightly. No. No. I'm going to move on then if there isn't any. Item.
I'd just like to make probably a facetious comment.
There's a surprise.
I'm very impressed that he intended a leadership in action call.
Thank you for that. Item 2 is the Works Department report, which is enclosed. Any comments on that? Councillor Smith, please, first, and then Councillor Ewing.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just wondered whether we have any definite date for the removal of the scaffolding on Market Road cottages, because it seems to be a growing trend to put scaffolding up in Tavistock.
Councillor Smith, you might like to know that I congratulated the General Manager before the start of this meeting in having arranged to get yet more of Duke Street covered in scaffolding. I thought I was most impressed with his performance. He says he has nothing actually to do with it, but it does look nice that we've now got the opposite side of the road going to look exactly like our side of the road in the not too distant future. Councillor Ewings.
Just on the matter of scaffolding, I've just come from a bid meeting, and the scaffolding on Venus on the old Bristol and West building only has a licence issued by West Devon until the 29th of July. No action has taken place on that scaffolding since the 9th of January, and there have been issues over who owns it, and the people who put the scaffolding up found out they didn't own the building. So it's been apparently an interesting situation, but from what I understand now, that licence is only until the 29th of July, and then the scaffolding has to come down. So that's that scaffolding. My point was on the Cemetery Lodge. What sort of works are taking place?
I don't know. General Manager, please.
In answer to Councillor Smith's question, the last parts of the scaffolding will be coming down early part of next week once the barge boards have been redecorated. So they should be down by the end of the week, scaffolding. In relation to Cemetery Lodge, it's quite a small budget in relation to capital works which are required, and primarily it's around repointing works and repairs to chimney.
Okay, Councillor Mrs Ewings, are you actually asking the Town Clerk to write to West Devon Borough Council expressing their concerns over the scaffolding in case there should be an application to renew the licence?
I think, yes, I think we should, working with the other organisations, because our scaffolding is due to go up and we've applied for our licence, and, you know, we will be getting on with our work. Well, I understand we've applied for our licence in Duke Street.
Members, would you be happy for the clerk to write on your behalf to West Devon Borough Council expressing our... I've heard a lot of adverse comments about the fact that it's been there for a long time. It does seem to obstruct the roadway and is causing some problems, but it's entirely in your hands, members.
Sorry, just wanted. Can I just clarify something? Is it the Borough Council? I would have assumed it would be the County Council as the Highway Authority, because the scaffolding is erected on the highway and the footpath is part of the highway. Question mark.
From what I understand from the bid manager tonight, she said she had spoken with West Devon and she's spoken with Gem Scaffolding, and they said, so whether it's West Devon, I don't know.
Can we short-circuit this then? If you're happy for a letter to be written, members, we can simply make sure it goes to the appropriate authority.
The second lot of scaffolding that they've recently just put up on that property does extend into the road. It means a lady cannot turn her car and they are having to drive the wrong way on that road because the scaffolding is coming out beyond what it is allowed to come out, and it has been measured,
Yes,
etc.
that complaint has been registered with me in the fact that I can't remember the address, but there is a narrow lane, if you're aware, on the left-hand side going up the road. There's a narrow lane in on the left, there is a lady who lives in there and she's now unable to get her car in from one direction, has to do it from the opposite direction.
Yeah.
There is no other way for her to do it. Apparently, I haven't personally witnessed it, but I have had a formal complaint about that.
I believe Robertson's pizza place are watching their wall daily for these manoeuvres that are taking place. So I would like to recommend, and I think we already have agreed now, that we will...
Members seem to be... I mean, there's little we can do, but I think as a town council we obviously have an interest and a concern about the appearance of the streets of our town and what effect that might have on our businesses, and it would seem not unreasonable that we should register our concern, particularly over the scaffolding that's been there for what appears to be a protracted period of time with no work going on.
Since almost last year's Goose Fair.
Okay, thank you for that. I've lost track. Councillor Mrs Johnson, wasn't it?
Yeah, thank
I
you.
did write it down.
There's on page 3, there's an item about the Sensory Garden saying that an event has taken place, which is on the 30th of June, which I don't think we've quite got to yet. So I think we've either got the date wrong or they need to change the whenever it was.
It was actually the 30th of May, and I'm sad to have to report that those people representing Tavistock in the Petang competition with the residents of Pontivy put up a very, very poor performance indeed. But then we did discover subsequently that one of the individuals there was the regional champion and president of whatever their Petang league is in and around Pontivy, and it was somewhat discouraging that he managed to flick the ball and drop it on the jack almost every time. So we did do our best, but I'm afraid we did not do too well in representing the town. However, it was a very pleasant and very enjoyable time, and your current deputy mayor, I hadn't realised previously, but he is actually the secretary of the Twinning Association, so we then had a nice buffet in the town hall, and they all thoroughly enjoyed themselves. Right, so we've covered... what's wrong with me tonight? I keep losing my agenda. I have a feeling the town clerk is trying to confuse me. Item 3 is town hall enclosed. Any comments on that? No. Pannier market enclosed. No. Okay. So if we move on then to the Assistant to Town Clerk's report, I would ask you please to note at the very top we have settled on dates for the civic diary. So the civic service will be on the 24th of September. It says provisional, but it has now been confirmed. The vicar was away on holiday at the time, but he's back and has said that the church is available and the town hall is available for the run fight afterward. Remembrance Sunday is Remembrance Sunday. The Mayor's end of Christmas party is apparently on the 18th of December. I think that's now been confirmed, has it not? No?
It has to go through the committee of West End.
All right, West End Club, okay.
Thank you for arranging it on my birthday.
Which is this, a Christmas party? We'll try and arrange a cake for you then, shall we?
Oh, that's so good. I will note that.
I'm sure you will. If I forget, I'm going to have to go and buy one at short notice, aren't I? And the Civic Board is on the 13th of April. As far as we can tell, that doesn't clash with Easter school holidays, bank holidays, or with Rotary, Lions or anyone else's ball. It's not adjacent to. That doesn't mean to say that it won't, but we're pretty sure that it won't. Is there anything else? The Mayor's charity for this year, I'm going to ask the assistant to the town clerk because I've forgotten what we agreed, but it's a local charity.
It is Tavistock Physically Challenged Group.
Oh, well, that's so great.
I was really keen to do what I did when I was mayor last time, which was to ensure that I chose a local charity rather than a national charity, because the Mary Budding Trust that I chose last time, every single penny they raise goes towards the provision of the facilities that they provide for young children with disabilities, and I understand that is exactly the same with this organisation. Certainly with the Mary Budding Trust, I think probably the most use of naming them as my charity was it raised their profile, and they seem to have been able to acquire more funding, and I'm hoping to do exactly the same with this particular charity as well. Yeah, you did say you would have to leave. So that will be my charity for the year, and they do provide an exceptionally good, reliable service. And as someone who, for quite a number of years, when I was in charge of Derriford Hospital and the Rowan's Younger Disabled unit was there, I used to regularly take the people who were physically disabled, youngsters. We had 2 minibuses, and I used to drive one, and we used to take them to the pub of an evening. We'd take them out weekends for lunches and various things, and for them to get out of their institution or their homes was just wonderful. And it was hard work because they were severely disabled, so it was hard work, but it was very rewarding work. So I'm delighted to support a local charity which does exactly that for people. Anything else on the Assistant to the Town Clerk's report, other than noting the fact that I have actually read it this time? No? Okay, so if we then move on to... It's totally lost the agenda now, where am I? We move on then to the minutes of the bid company. Where's the bloody agenda gone? Any comments? No? So if we then move on to the Whitchurch Down Consultative Group, that was a very low-key meeting. Everyone is happy. The various parties are managing to get on quite well with each other. Everything was very peaceful and pleasant. Sorry? We did. It was I've never seen that many people before at a meeting, ever. A meeting of that particular committee. The attendance seems to be very hit and miss. We're then on to the Town Hall and Pannier Market Consultative Group. I know nothing about that, so I'm not able to comment. No? And then is there any update from or questions to council representatives who serve on other outside bodies? I note the Chamber's not on here tonight. And Councillor Mrs Ewings, I think it was, didn't make reference to it earlier in the meeting. I was invited as the Mayor to go to their next meeting. Unfortunately, I'm in Birmingham at the LGA conference for that week, so I won't be able to attend, but I have asked that my willingness to attend a meeting is there. I'm not sure quite, Mrs Ewings, I think you suggested that we were being criticised for not turning up again.
Yes, I understand that from Mr Harper this afternoon, the Chairman, that they have written with their concerns to the Town Clerk.
They have.
That since I went to their AGM, there has been no member from Tavistock Town Council.
Right. Councillor Williamson, you look as though you're about to strike.
I can say just a few words about that. I chose not to attend that meeting because it clashed directly with our wedding anniversary. I did explain to the Town Clerk I prefer to be somewhere else dining with my wife rather than going to Chamber, and I was also deputed, of course, just before that.
You were indeed.
And I'd forgotten it was a clash, and I wasn't going to apologise to my wife, but I'd rather apologise to Chamber, which I did not directly but through the Town Clerk. Now I assume by ways and means the message was passed that I shall be there next time.
Thank you. I think my judgment would be that you made an extremely wise choice. Town Clerk, please.
Just to let you know, I have been in touch with the Chamber of Commerce. I have also passed on our anticipated apologies from the member side of things for the next meeting, because that does clash with an informal evening for council that we are scheduling, which will shortly be notified of in relation to neighbourhood planning. So they are aware that from a member perspective, the next meeting is likely to be problematic, but then hopefully normal service will be resumed thereafter. And they are aware also of the Mayor's availability to attend if there are specific issues which pick up on his remit.
Okay. Item 11, to receive such communications or reports. I have nothing that I wish to bring forward. Neither do I have anything under item 12, urgent matters. So with great sadness, Mrs. Turpin, we have to bid you farewell for this evening, but it's nice to see you back with us. I take it it's too early to know if the baby's not due quite yet, is it? Sam's, yeah. No, but it's fairly soon, isn't it? And I think